There were three main goals we had in mind when building MRTK3. The first was modularity. We wanted to make MRTK more modular and easy to isolate into components, so you can pick and choose the individual packages you want without having to bring in all of MRTK, which can be quite large. And the second was flexibility in design. We wanted to make our UI tooling more flexible and easy for you to use. So for example, when you want to resize a button or adjust grid spacing, we wanted to make that experience more seamless. And to do that, we combined our rich 3D UI with the Canvas layout system so that now you can create UI that's both immersive and tactile, as well as automatically laid out and resizable. And third, performance was one of the key things we had in mind when designing MRTK3. We had performance in mind for all our MRTK modules so that you can build the best, most optimized app using MRTK.
Hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this next session with Shreya, who will talk about how to design for XR experiences. And we'll just get started with unmuting and sharing a presentation, and then see how that goes. And then I'll be here later for questions. Hello Shreya.
Hi everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So hi, just to give you a little bit of background, my name is Shreya and I work as a full-time XR experience designer. And I've done my bachelor's in communication design. Then I worked a little bit around in advertising. I really loved ideation, and I was like, this is it, until I came across this amazing virtual world. And I was like, that's the next place I need to be in. So that's when I decided to pursue my master's in immersive media design. It's basically a course from MIT Institute of Design Pune, and it was just amazing. So let me get started. I'll quickly share my screen. So, okay. Is this visible? Okay. So now let's talk about these are the list of topics I would love to cover in this session today. So we'll first talk a little bit about XR design and the skills that you need to be an XR designer. What are the tools that we as designers commonly use to achieve our goals? The design process that we usually go through, And what makes XR design a little different from our traditional design, basically the UX design or maybe the product design. There's a lot of collaboration between the two, but then there are certain specifics that you need for XR design. Then a little bit more on the future of XR and some of my closing thoughts. So to start with, what is XR design? Well, XR design is basically an extended reality. It's a acronym for that, and it's a mix of everything, anything physical, digital, which you see, which is you can call it as augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality, and all these variables. So if you design for any of these mediums, this is called like an XR design. All of this XR is basically like an umbrella term, and which encompasses all of these three designs. And I think everybody would normally like already know, because you've been going through a lot of these talks before, what is AR, MR, and VR. But let me just take you in brief through all of these three technologies. AR is basically when we overlay a digital layer over physical elements. So one of the best and the most famous example for this is Pokemon Go. So even if you were in your living room or your backyard, you could overlay Pokemons, you had to find and search. So the Pokemon that you saw there was an augmented or a digital layer of your physical world. Now, a level above this one is called mixed reality. So you need a specific headset for this. Some of the most common mixed reality headsets are HoloLens or Magic Leap. And coming up, the newest one is Oculus Pro. It is kind of supporting, it's not a dedicated mixed reality headset, but it does support with its pass through. So, what really happens in mixed reality is you're able to interact a lot more with the digital elements. So, you still see your physical world around you, but then there are other digital layers on top of it. Now, next comes is virtual reality. Well, virtual reality is kind of personal. So, when it comes to augmented reality, mixed reality, all of them are a little more like you can share your experience with others. But when it comes to virtual reality, you're taken into a different world altogether. So, it's a fully immersive environment. And yeah, so next, the question is then who is an XR designer? Well, obviously the person who is designing all of these experiences, right? So an XR designer is somebody who is able to design for all of these technologies and also understand the technical bits of it as well. So when you look at, so you're actually, you need to have an understanding of UX. So because as a designer you need to empathize with the user, so user comes first. And when you empathize with the user, and then there is this whole new technology which the user is not at all uh, comfortable with or is completely new to it, then how do you design things? So that is the bridge that you build, and that is who you are as an XR designer. So you're basically a bridge between the devs and the users, bridge between the 3D persons and the users. Then let's talk a little bit more about the skills that you need to be an XR designer. Um, I have laid down into some of the must-haves and the good-to-haves. Well, some of the must-haves I've realized is the passion and purpose for this field. I feel it's really important because this field is extremely new, and you need to do a lot of research. So, unlike the traditional UX design or product design, there is not a lot of community out there to help you through. There are no fixed set of guidelines or documentations there. So, you need to build your own path. You need to follow your own path and do a lot of research, uh, go through various experiences, even the good and the bad ones. And that's when you get to know like, okay, what works and what doesn't work. And all of that process, you will be only able to invest so much of time inside learning a new skill only if you have that much of passion and purpose. So that's like a must have. And the next must have would be a fundamental understanding of UX. So e- so UX skills would include, like, since at the end of the day we are designing things for our users, right? So it would be so we start with a basic research, who our target audience is, and we do a lot of these market research. We create the basic design flow, which is like taking inspiration, creating mood boards, and things like that. So, all of those things, and then even analyzing those things. So, UX skills don't just stop at researching, but then how, with whatever research that you have had so far, so how are you going to collect insights from that? And that's the part where you play, like all of your UX skills come into play. You really need to understand the pain and the gains of the user, create personas, and a lot of that. And the last part is about the whole user testing. So if you hadn't considered your target user in the first place, you won't be able to move forward with it. Your design, no matter how good it looks, it won't work. So the basics of UX skills, like, they still stand, and it's like a must have for being an XR designer. The next one is spatial understanding. So, what I mean by that is all of these technologies are 3D technology. So, it's about how an object behaves with the other object in a whole 3D way. So, what is the relationship an one object shares with the another? For example, if you're sitting around a sofa, and then you have a cup, and then there is a table there. So, what is the relationship the cup, the table, and the sofa share in that whole space? It's not 2D design. So, a lot of people confuse and think that, okay, because I know 2D design, I can get into 3D. But understanding that whole spatial, like, how things would look like from a when you're inside the 3D space, that is kind of very important. So let's talk a little bit more about good to haves. Well, these are good to haves, and you may think like these are all individual skills. Like, how am I supposed to have a lot of these skills? So think of it like this: as an XR designer, you're more like a generalist designer. So you do all the things that a UX designer does, that a product designer does, that a sound designer does, visual designer, graphic designer, game designer. So you need to have an understanding. I'm not saying you go into depth, but then you need to have an overall understanding of how these individual designs, these individual streams of design, they come together and they form like a really good experience. So, especially when it comes to sound design can be used in various ways. I really love the uh, experience done by Moss or Vacation Simulator. Something, if you have gone through Vacation Simulator, i- those TV boxes that you see are when they when they talk to you in that environment, it feels like you're not alone. And suddenly, when you don't know where to look at, there's a little ting from, like, there's a little sound from your back, and then you know, okay, the sound is coming from there. Sound is about, in XR, the sound, you can play a lot with sound. It's basically you have the whole spatial environment, you have the whole 360 there. You can use sound to navigate to different places. You can use sound to trigger into different things. And then comes motion design. Well, motion design obviously is really nice if you could have that in the whole experience. This is like a good add-on, but a good example that I can give you is, it's like adding masala to your vegetables. It's like that. You can have boiled vegetables, and then you can have a really nice good masala gravy. So all of these good to haves are those gravy that you need in your food. That is what they do to your experience. So motion design is something like, for example, when you're in an onboarding process, you're in. So when you click on something, a functional design is something when you click on something. it should do something. But then a good design would be, a good motion design would be, when you click on something, it gives you really nice feedback. There can be some clicks, or there can be some rings around the place that you have clicked, or the swift animation between two three different slides, the swift motion between the menu systems. So that is something which is part of motion design, and it definitely adds to your experience. Then there is visual design. So what is visual design? I Visual design is anything that can also make or break your experience. So you can take an example of a Halloween party. So if it is an Halloween experience, you would like the whole experience to have little elements of Halloween. The whole mood would be very kind of dark. You would have pumpkins hanging around. You'd have skeletons, skulls, and all of those things would have even the UI there. You won't have a clean and a crisp UI. You would rather have, certain things like there's a blood coming out of the UI or things like that, certain extra elements, but you'll keep that in a particular theme. So it's very important, especially when we are designing like B2B projects, where we look at only the functional aspects of it. So it's important to bring that visual design thing. It's important to have all of these themes. They should kind of just come together, right, to form a whole experience. Okay, moving on to game design. Well, game design, at the end of the day, we are started with games. Like gaming is the industry in VR which is booming a lot currently as well. And games is there's a lot to learn from games. And from the gaming design you can learn the behavioral science of users, like how they are creating levels, and how they keep the user hooked into the experience, the kind of feedback they give at every stage. For example, if you're going through progress, like it's a full paged form, and then at each stage, usually in games they have a tick mark. Okay, you have already completed this. So we can actually bring in our experiences a lot of these specific game elements that have really good like we have already tested them out in the game design process. So these are all the good to haves that you need to have. Next, let's talk a little bit about tools. Okay, now I have the skills. What are the tools I need for becoming an XR designer? So I would say you need, first of all, a laptop and obviously a headset to get started with. And I understand that headset is not the first, it might not be a first priority for you, and you would have to invest in a lot of money. But then if you haven't experienced something, how are you going to give that experience back to the user? If you don't know what is out there in the market, how are you going to design new things? So I would suggest that get a headset and try out various experiences first of all, even before getting started, so you understand the capability of VR, you understand the capabilities of AR. Just download random AR apps, it's fine. Just understand what is the possibility, what are the things that you can achieve in this field. And then when you have a particular use case and you want to get started off, I usually like to start off with paper and pencil. I like to just put down my ideas, sketch a little bit, whatever the theme or the use case is, and then I translate that to my Figma. So I personally like Figma a lot because it has both, like it has design as well as FigJam. So FigJam is a place where I generally do a lot of these ideations. Like if you look at my boards, they're going to be jammed with all the inspiration that I've collected from the internet or from the screenshots that I've taken from my headset. Like all these experiences, I like to collect certain interactions. So I start off with the this a lot of inspiration and stuff. So Figma is a good tool, but you can use any kind of compositing tool, you can say. So it could be Figma, it could be Adobe XD, Photoshop, Illustrator, anything that you're comfortable with. This is just to get you started, build storyboards, do all of those user UX checklist, be it user flows, be it journey mapping, personas, anything. So all of those things, you can do it in Figma. Uh, Next, once you are done with your storyboard, once you have built out something, then you would like to see that into the whole device, right? But then, is there a tool for it? Well, there is Shapes XR. So what Shapes XR does is it basically gives you an ability to design things right in the VR headset. So you might have seen various videos or even heard the name. It's a really good tool. You can in fact import a lot of these 3D assets that you might have downloaded. You can import that in Shapes XR and then build on top of it. So that's a really good storyboarding tool. Or you can take stuff from Figma and then import that as pictures and draw on top of it. So that's there. One of the 3D tools, I would say, it's free and it's really good to use. It has a little bit of learning curve, but much lesser than the other 3D softwares available like Maya or AutoCAD. Then that's Blender. So Blender, there are a lot of tutorials. There's a huge community. You can easily learn. You don't have to go in depth with each of these tools, but it is something that will help you fasten your process in design. These were all tools that help you actually do the basic designing of things. But then when it comes to development, so when you have designed something, you would like to see it developed, right? To create quick and easy prototypes, there's a tool that we use. It's called Unity or Unreal. So Unity is has a little bit lesser learning curve, but then Unreal also has blueprints which are considerably easy if you want to go the no code rule. So if you want to go no code, you can try the Unreal blueprint. But then Unity has a huge community and it has a lot of tutorials to to just do a quick prototyping. Go forward with Unity. You can the feeling that you get when you're seeing your built product the first time, it's like amazing. So yeah, one second. So this is the design process, and as you can see, this is pretty simple, and this is something very similar to what you follow as in traditional design. So you start with the theme, inspiration, mood boards. Then you do a research, which is market research, target user research. Then you build empathy boards, journey boards. You understand the user's pains, gains. You build user flows. Then you start with storyboarding. So I feel the most important part is the user flow. The more crisp and clear your user flow is, the better it is going to be implemented by the devs. So please do focus on user flows and storyboarding. And if you're also doing visual designs, then that's where it comes. You can do quick visual designs with Figma. And then one of the important aspects of this design process is collaborating with the dev team to implement your designs. So you have designed an amazing product, but if it is not implemented that way, you never as a designer, you'll feel a lot unsatisfied. Oh, I did so much, and at the end of the day, it didn't get implemented. So it's important that you're there throughout that process. And then you also do a user testing. You can do user testing in various phases as well. So initially you can start with yourself, like build up the whole prototype, then give that prototype bit to the devs, and then they can give you a little bit of POC, and then they can sorry, MVP, and then you can build on it. So user testing should be done in phases. So this is an overall design process. So, like I had mentioned before, there are huge difference when you design for traditional media and then when you design for XR. And some of them are these. So, a lot of people are very much concerned with motion sickness. So, yes, that is there. But as designers, is there a way to prevent it? Is there a way that you can not have motion sickness? So there are various ways to do that. While designing, always keep in mind that the user is grounded. There is some place that the user is standing upon, or maybe the user is sitting upon. The user should not be in air, and the horizon, it should always be there, like the user should be able to see it. Even if it is a room, the user should be able to see like the end of the room, if there's a TV or something. If it is outdoor, like on an island, the user can see, okay, the end of the sea line, that's where the horizon is. So it's important for the user to see the horizon. You also need to give users control over movement. So do not do any kind of jerky movements, or just randomly move the camera around without the user's permission. Let user control that movement. Let user move that camera. Don't randomly move the camera. Don't move the whole scene around you. Then when it comes to uh, racing games like a bike racing or a driving simulator, things like that, use a constant velocity. Even though when the user is speeding in maybe a car racing game, there needs to be a constant velocity. And your 3D elements out there in the scene, they should not be glitching. So you need to also maintain head tracking and then optimize your scene accordingly, because when you're moving, the environment is also moving. So then there is something called as LOD, which we have to take care of. That's a little technical term, but then it's important to basically have constant velocity and optimize your environment. So even when there's constant velocity, your 3D elements are not moving or glitching around. Then if you are going to change orientation, for example, if you have an experience where the user has to climb on a ladder and then come back down, so what do? You make, so as soon you can't, like if a user clicks on a button supposedly, if you press on it, user's position would be on top of the ladder, but then it shouldn't feel like a jump. It should be like a process. So you can give a fade in or a fade out, fade to black and fade black out, like, so between that process, like between the user moving from this position to this, there should be a fade in, uh, or a blink, you can call it a blink animation, which helps the user understand, okay, something has changed. And that little bit of nausea that you might give the user when they're suddenly moving up in the air, that reduces. So things like this is kind of very important in VR. Then this is something, these are some documentation we have on VR. It talks about comfortable viewing distances in VR. So when you look at this, so this is a user, and this is the certain 2.2 to 3 meters of distance. Then this is like a 20-meter radius. So if this is the user, our eyes actually can see till here. So ideally, we say like any kind of world space UI that you have, it should be between 2 to 3 meters of this radius. That's like the most comfortable reading zone. If you want to have world space UIs or things like that, have it at two meters. And then everything in the background is there, but then it kind of blurs as far as it goes, like the user cannot read, but then it is still part of the main focus. So you can have certain items which can be highlighted in the distance. So this is some, there could be a book that you want the user to go and grab, so you can still have it here. Now you can use your visual clues. So use visual cues to go here and make the user go here and grab that thing. This is the periphery area. A really good way of using this periphery could be if you want your user to turn to a specific direction, if you want the user to turn to right. So now you can use what? You can use sound or even the visual cues. Because somewhere in the vicinity you can see, okay, something is glowing, something is blinking over here. Then you would look over here. So you can use periphery in a very smart way, but do not have any kind of uh, very important things out here. Don't have any kind of important things. This was about the radius that you can design, and this was about like the vertical distance. So usually when you have world space UI, you usually keep it between 20 to 12 degrees. So that is something like the eye level, and the moment you move things up, it becomes a little difficult because somebody will have to continuously stretch their neck over there, or if it is too low, it becomes very difficult to continuously have this movement. So keep these things into consideration. One of a quick examples for this one is this. Yeah. So if you can see, this is like a UI which they can carry around and they have to read. Like you can perform major actions from this UI, and you can easily view things from here. You know where the resume is, you know what these things mean. But when you look at the right side, the text is illegible. You can't even read the text. How will you perform certain actions? So this is something how you should not design. So always whenever you design something, have a quick look in the VR. How is it looking? Uh, there is further documentation on sizes of text as well. You can search that online. It's and the meter that we are using for VR is called DMM, which is like distance with minutes meter. Sorry. So that's there. And storytelling, I feel storytelling is the most important aspect of VR. This is one tool which VR is supposed to be uh, a best empathy tool, and I think we should totally use it. Now if you look at it, there are a lot of narratives out there in VR experiences, right? And look at Moss VR. Moss VR is doing an amazing job at creating this story, even Vacation Simulator, Job Simulator, things like that. But I feel that story is something, this whole story arc, where you introduce something, there's a beginning, you introduce the characters, and then there are certain actions that you have to perform. There's a climax, and then there's a resolution to it, there's a result. So we are doing these story arc in some of the narrative VR forms, but when it comes to B2B, I feel this is something that we are missing. This is the missed opportunity that we have in all these functioning or functional experiences. For example, take medical. So when it comes about the whole medical thing, so what do you do? Like a general, let's take an example of a so there's a patient, you can take roles and you are a doctor, so you're training this doctor to work with a nurse, and you'll give them a background, like a patient is coming in, the patient won't directly come in the VR headset and lie on the bed, right? You need to give the patient's history. You need to understand, okay, what were the medications that you were on, is there anything past. So you use that as a building premise, give them a background, and then when it comes to all of these actions, so a functional experience would be you picked up a tool, the doctor just picked up a tool. But then a good a good experience would be when the user picks up a tool, and then he talks about precision. So three mistakes that doctors do while doing precision, while making precision, sorry. So it can talk about like that. Or better example, this is more towards functional design, like going beyond functional design basically. um, yeah, so using this story arc in B2B experiences is something that we need to start doing, going beyond our ways. Next, like this is an example, like I was saying, for the Moss VR. This is a really nice experience. You start off with a book, and if you one of the really good aspects of this whole thing is you are a third person, and you're seeing this mouse walking around in this whole experience. And if you want to like open this door, this will very slightly this will highlight, but you'll know, okay, this is highlight and this is something that you can interact with. So, and the way the whole story unfolds is really nice. So, whenever you have time, just go through this once. Next, sound for XR. So, because VR gives us this whole ability of having spatial sounds, please use them in your experiences. Do not do not use mono sounds. Use stereo sounds. Use spatial sounds. So if there is somebody calling out you from behind, so if you want the user to look behind, then you can actually have somebody call them from behind. And use the sounds of the objects. So if you're keeping a mug on the table, then use that. Like have that clink sound. If it is on a wooden, then it would have a thud sound. So things like that, like match the sound to the object it represents. Have use spatial audios. There needs to be a background music adds in amazing levels of immersion. It kind of helps you zone into the whole experience. So that's kind of very nice, but then also have it at comfortable levels. And you can also have some kind of an accessibility thing here, like you can let the user decide uh, how much amount of background music do they want. Then this is something that I've already mentioned about having people look into their direction. And you can also do audio triggered events within the whole environment. So audio triggered would be something like if you cross something. For example, if you actually were in a racing game and you finished, so as soon as you cross that finishing line, suddenly there's an audio trigger. People are clapping. There are like balloon burst sounds, things like that. So take advantage of that. So these are some of the important things in VR which is missing currently, and I feel kind of very strongly about it because currently we are so busy making experiences just work, especially like the B2B ones, be it any kind of training simulators or any kind of other things. So all of these experiences are to do. Like, okay, if I have to move my phone from here to here, okay, I've done that. But then, how can I make that experience better? I can actually, whenever I pick the phone, I can have the phone might just wish me, hey, good afternoon. And then I can just keep it. So, even that little bit of, hey, good afternoon brings a little delight to me. All of this is part of actually social and emotional design. This is something that is missing and something which is left out. It's still part of UX design. These are some of the topics that we don't talk so much. It's there, but we don't talk so much in traditional UX design. But in VR, this is an extremely important skill and a tool to have. Use it because the kind of emotions that you can simulate in VR is amazing because of its level of presence. When you are inside VR, uh, you feel your presence inside that whole environment. You have that presence. So, whatever things that uh, we feel, we feel that is happening real to us. When we talk about safety and privacy, like I have heard so many stories about going into social VR environments and getting abused. Um, And it could be simply just name calling or coming into your own private space, but are, even though it is virtual, they are doing that to your avatar. But then how human brains perceive it, it's very real. To them it feels real. The brain can actually be traumatized. So it's important as designers, whenever we are designing for this whole VR or AR or MR, any kind of technology, that we keep in mind these safety protocols right from the very start. And even like have gender, like inclusion and diversities. Because for example, when it comes to like have women in place right from the start of the design process. So for example, uh, if you're designing a social VR experience, and um, it's like when somebody is being harassed and abused, so you might, simplest thing to do is just block. You can give things to block the other user. Then but then a good way to do that is you can actually introduce something like a pepper spray. And if there are women involved in the team, in the design team right from the start, so what really happens is you can design things differently. You're aware of the things that a woman only understands, or be it any other gender. So it's not your fault, it's about the awareness that the other person might have. It could be not just gender related, it could be cultural related as well. So it's important to bring all of these cultural elements, inclusive elements to all of this uh, sorry, VR environments. uh, and one second. And lastly, accessibility. It's important to consider accessibility. It could be color blindedness or one-handedness also. A lot of VR experiences, they have like left side there is a menu, and on the right side you interact with that menu. What if the person does not have this hand? Like, are you even considering it? Can they not experience the whole VR experience like you've built and you wanted to build it, right? So build it for everybody. You can, whatever menu system you have, you can take that menu system out here. Or even just left-handedness. A lot of these VR experiences that I've gone through, they mostly are like right-handedness. Like right is the dominant hand. But then some of the VR experiences, they have at the very beginning, they say, okay, which is your dominant hand? So all of these onboarding process is kind of important when you go through this, when you design VR experiences. So do consider accessibility, do consider cultural and safety reasons, privacy, and so on. Lastly, just my closing thoughts. It's important as designers that we go beyond and we rise above the functional experiences which are around. We build better and delightful experiences. So, yeah, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. And people can ask questions in the YouTube live stream and also on Discord. And while they get started typing, I'll have some questions for you.
Okay.
Um, in your opinion, what is kind of the most difficult skill to acquire? You had a whole bunch of skills and it was like, oh my God, you need to learn really a lot.
Yeah.
Um, to be an XR designer. So, what do you think is the most difficult? I mean, it's probably personal, but what would be the most difficult for you to acquire?
For me, I actually have practiced a lot of them over the period of time. So I didn't go into depth of each of them, but I did understand the pipeline, everything. So there was a time in Unity I could actually build experiences of my own, completely like fully coded. But now, like I haven't touched Unity at all. In it's been a year almost. I'm more focused on the user story bit. So now for me to go back into Unity is kind of difficult. So I
So,
would say that. Yeah.
yeah, so in your case, you would say you need to have a broad overview of all the topics that you mentioned, and then
Exactly.
may have dedicated people, like you also said, like, hey, you hand it over to the developers that they implement your design. And then I would like to ask, do you have any examples for good XR design that you would recommend? Like any experiences that are out there that people can look at that have done something very specific and very well, like in terms of what's the dominant hand, or if there's a switching of the hands possible. Do you know any where you would say, hey, they've done this and this really good?
Yeah, I do. So, one of the really good examples from a storyline perspective would be Elixir. Elixir is good in terms of the hand tracking. It's a game by Meta itself, but then it's really good with hand tracking and the way there's a narrator and you don't see the narrator, but you just hear it. But her presence, her sound is so profound in the whole experience that you feel that she's just there throughout with you. You're not alone in there, and you just kind of follow through even if you don't want to. So there's a little bit about that, like in that experience she tells you like, do not touch that box, I am going away and I'll be back in a minute. And then, like, as humans you're bound to go and open that box. So I really like that kind of an aspect. So it's very delightful, and it just gives you a joy when you go through that whole experience. It's really nice. The other experience I would say, like I've mentioned before that also, it's Vacation Simulator and Moss. Moss is a really good example of third person VR. So you're the godlike person there, and you're like, you're you're actually making the rat is like, the mouse is like a puppet, and whatever you are doing, the mouse has to kind of follow. So it's a good example of that. And Vacation Simulator, I really like the interactions there. Also, the tiny TVs that you have in Vacation Simulator, those are two characters, and the way they take you through each of them, like they have a little conversation between them. So it's really nice. When I talk about emotional design, I think that's an example I could give.
Cool, thank you. And also, what is the hardest part in XR design to get right? Like, what's kind of is limited by technology or by what is able to do or something like what is at the moment like where you know, okay, this is worse, difficult, and here one needs to pay really close attention to get it working.
uh, when it comes to, like, it is something personal to me, because when we are working, it's like we have tight deadlines. So I may have designed like incomplete details, but when it gets to the devs, because of the deadlines, it's like, okay, they kind of like chop it off. Look, no, not this, not this, not this. And at the end of the day, what we have is just the functional design. So what remains is just basically picking the object and putting it there at its place. And I feel, what happened to all that layers that I had created? So there needs to be a proper bridge, a communication, and that's the most difficult aspect of this whole XR design. So as designers, we are basically at the bridge between different teams, and it's important to have effective communication between these teams.
So the developers need to get more time or the whole projects?
The whole project, it depends. Like, there are various reasons to it, but yeah, I feel that's the most important aspect.
And maybe a last question: what are you most excited about in like in the future of XR design? Like, what's the next step in terms of special interactions that are possible, or special, I don't know, auditory hardware, or even like what are paradigms that are changing that you see in the design for XR that will make it a different experience?
So what I'm really excited about the future is, the pass through that Oculus Quest Pro is coming up with, like the level of content that we can have with pass through, and the level of impact that we can bring in, especially with medical or even like machinery or mechanical industrial use case. Like that's a lot. That is kind of exciting. But then the other exciting part is, even though hand tracking is there, but then we are not able to use it completely. Somehow, if I can get more time, and if the technology like progresses more, and if we are able to improve this whole hand tracking, uh, we won't need controllers. So I am waiting and excited for the day when it comes where I can actually wear VR like this and just work around with my hands.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'll play an outro video and take care.
Yeah. Thank you.